Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Deception. Jordan Boyer had built his life on two unshakable pillars: family and loyalty. At 42, he commanded respect as the owner of Boyer Security Solutions, a firm that specialized in high-end personal protection and corporate security. His military background, 12 years as a Special Forces operative, had taught him that survival depended on reading people correctly and never showing weakness to those who might exploit it. The Boyer family home in suburban Connecticut reflected Jordan's success, a sprawling colonial on 3 acres, complete with state-of-the-art security systems that he'd installed himself. Diana Boyer, his wife of 16 years, had always appreciated the finer things their lifestyle afforded. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and had once been the perfect partner for a man building an empire. Their daughter Emma, 15, was the light of Jordan's world, intelligent, spirited, and the only person who could make the hardened former soldier smile without reservation. Jordan's business partner, Charles Fry, had been part of their lives for 8 years. The partnership had been born from necessity. Charles brought the financial acumen and political connections that Jordan's military efficiency alone couldn't provide. Charles was smooth where Jordan was direct, diplomatic where Jordan was forceful. At 38, Charles possessed the kind of effortless charm that opened doors and loosened tongues. He was unmarried, claiming his dedication to the business left no time for relationships, a statement that had always rung false to Jordan's trained ear. The warning signs had been there for months, hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. Diana's new interest in yoga classes that ran unusually late. Her sudden enthusiasm for weekend spa retreats with friends Jordan had never met. The way she'd grown distant during family dinners. Her attention drifting to her phone with increasing frequency. Emma had begun spending more time in her room, claiming homework demanded her full attention. But Jordan had noticed the shadows under her eyes and the way she sometimes flinched when Diana entered the room. Jordan's instincts, honed by years of combat and security work, had been screaming that something was wrong. But he'd ignored them, choosing to believe in the illusion of domestic peace. That had been his first mistake, and in Jordan Boyer's world, mistakes had consequences. The Boyer security offices occupied the top floor of a downtown Hartford building, with windows offering a commanding view of the Connecticut River. Jordan had designed the space to reflect strength and competence. Polished granite surfaces, awards and commendation from his military service, and photographs of successful operations with high-profile clients. Charles's office adjoined his, separated by a glass partition that could be made opaque at the touch of a button. On this particular Tuesday morning in November, Jordan was reviewing contracts for a new client when Charles knocked on his door. His partner entered with his usual confident stride, but Jordan's trained eye caught the subtle tells. The slight tension around Charles's eyes, the way his smile didn't quite reach them, the almost imperceptible hesitation before speaking. "Morning, Jordan. I wanted to discuss the Henderson account. Their security needs are more complex than we initially thought." Charles settled into the chair across from Jordan's desk, crossing his legs in a gesture that seemed too casual. Jordan studied his partner's face while they discussed business details. Charles had always been smooth, but lately there was something different, an undercurrent of satisfaction that seemed disconnected from their professional successes. It was the look of a man who believed he was getting away with something significant. After Charles left for a client meeting, Jordan remained at his desk, thinking. His daughter Emma would be home from school by now, probably starting her homework in the kitchen while Diana prepared dinner. It was a routine that had once brought him comfort, but now it felt like a performance stage for his benefit. That evening, Jordan arrived home to find Diana in the kitchen, moving with unusual nervous energy. She was preparing his favorite meal, grilled salmon with asparagus, but her movements lacked their usual grace. Emma sat at the kitchen island with her textbooks spread out, but her concentration seemed forced. "How was school today, sweetheart?" Jordan asked, kissing the top of Emma's head. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her 15 years. "It was fine, Dad. Just the usual drama." Diana's knife, paused for a fraction of a second as she diced vegetables. "What kind of drama?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Emma's gaze flickered between her parents. "Nothing important. Just friend stuff." Jordan sat beside his daughter, recognizing evasion when he heard it. In his security work, he'd learned that people usually lied to protect themselves or someone they cared about. The question was, who was Emma protecting? "Emma, you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Jordan's voice carried the gentle authority that had once calmed panicked clients under threat. For a moment, Emma's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. "I know, Dad. Sometimes things are complicated." Diana set down her knife and turned to face them, her expression unreadable. "Emma's been stressed about her college prep courses. Haven't you, honey?" The exchange felt rehearsed, and Jordan's instincts sharpened. Something was happening in his house, under his protection, and he was being kept in the dark. For a man who'd built his reputation on seeing threats before they materialized, the realization was both infuriating and galvanizing. After dinner, Jordan excused himself to his home office, a soundproofed room where he often worked on sensitive cases. He activated the security monitoring system, not to spy on his family, but to review the logs from recent weeks. The timestamps revealed patterns he'd been too trusting to notice. Diana's frequent afternoon absences, always during Emma's school hours. Phone calls to numbers not in their family plan. And most telling, gaps in the home security footage that suggested someone with administrative access had been editing the records. Jordan Boyer had spent his career protecting others from betrayal and violence. Now, it seemed, the threat had invaded his own home. As he sat in the darkness of his office, illuminated only by the glow of multiple monitors, one truth crystallized in his mind. Whoever was playing games with his family was about to discover that Jordan Boyer was not a man who forgave or forgot. The hunter had become the hunted, and the predators stalking his family were about to learn why that was a fatal mistake. Chapter 2. Shadows of Truth. The next morning brought an unseasonable warmth to Connecticut, but Jordan Boyer felt a chill that had nothing to do with weather. He'd spent the night analyzing security footage and phone records, and the patterns emerging painted a picture he wasn't ready to accept. Diana's deceptions weren't random. They were systematic, coordinated, and most disturbing of all, they seemed to involve Emma's compliance. Jordan arrived at the office early, before Charles or their small staff. He activated his personal security protocols, something he developed during his military days. When trust was compromised, verify everything. Using skills that had once helped him track terrorists across hostile territory, he began tracing the digital footprints of his wife's recent activities. Diana's credit card records revealed charges at restaurants Jordan had never heard of, at times when she claimed to be at yoga or with girlfriends. The locations clustered around the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where Boyer Security occasionally housed clients requiring discreet protection. Phone records showed regular calls to a disposable cell number, always lasting between 15 and 30 minutes, always during school hours when Emma would be away. Charles arrived at 9, his usual Tuesday routine including coffee and pastries from the bakery across the street. But today, Jordan noticed his partner's shoes, expensive Italian leather, the same brand Jordan had seen charged to Diana's credit card 3 weeks ago. A gift she claimed was for her brother's birthday. "Jordan, you're here early," Charles said, settling into his office. "Everything all right?" Through the glass partition, Jordan watched his partner's movements. Charles's phone buzzed, and he answered with a quick glance toward Jordan's office. The conversation was brief, but Jordan read his lips clearly enough to catch 2 words: not now. At 2:30 p.m., Jordan left the office claiming a client emergency. Instead, he drove to Emma's school, arriving just as classes ended. He parked across the street and waited, watching as students streamed out of the building. Emma appeared 20 minutes later, but instead of heading to the pickup area where Diana usually waited, she walked quickly toward the nearby Starbucks. Jordan followed at a distance, his training making him invisible among the afternoon shoppers. Inside the coffee shop, Emma sat at a corner table, her phone pressed to her ear. Even from across the room, Jordan could see she was crying. "Mom, I can't keep doing this. Emma's voice carried just far enough for Jordan to catch fragments. He's going to find out. It's not fair to him. Jordan moved closer, positioning himself behind a display rack where he could observe without being seen. Emma's conversation continued, her distress obvious. I know what you said about protecting the family, but Dad isn't the enemy here. Charles promised this would be over by now. I'm scared of what Dad will do when he finds out. The words hit Jordan like physical blows. His 15-year-old daughter was being used as a pawn in whatever game Diana and Charles were playing. The protective fury that had once driven him through enemy territory began building in his chest, cold and focused. Emma ended the call and sat staring at her phone, tears streaming down her face. Jordan's first instinct was to go to her, to demand answers, to end whatever was causing her pain. But his tactical mind overruled emotion. Moving too quickly would alert Diana and Charles, possibly making things worse for Emma. He needed more information before he acted. Jordan left the coffee shop and drove to the Marriott downtown. Using his security credentials and a carefully constructed story about investigating a threat to one of their high-profile guests, he gained access to the hotel's security office. The footage from the past month told the story his heart had been denying Diana and Charles, arriving separately but meeting in the elevator. Their body language spoke of intimacy, shared secrets, and worst of all, planning. The final piece of evidence came from the hotel's restaurant receipts. Charged to room 1247, registered under Charles's name, were dinners for 3 people on 4 separate occasions over the past 6 weeks. The timestamps coincided with Emma's claimed tutoring sessions that Jordan now realized had never existed. Driving home that evening, Jordan's mind shifted into operational mode. His family was under attack from within, and his daughter was being traumatized by people she should have been able to trust. The situation required the same systematic approach he'd used in hostile territory: gather intelligence, identify weaknesses, plan decisive action, and execute without mercy. At home, Diana greeted him with a smile that now looked plastic, carefully applied. "How was your day, honey? You seem tense." "Just the usual client demands," Jordan replied, studying her face. "How was your yoga class?" Diana's smile flickered for just a moment. "Challenging." The instructor introduced some new poses that really tested our flexibility. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She looked at her father with an expression that broke his heart, love mixed with fear and guilt. "Dad, can we talk later?" "About things." Jordan felt the weight of his daughter's burden, carried alone for too long. "Of course, sweetheart. Whenever you're ready." Diana moved quickly to the stove, her movements sharp with anxiety. "Emma, why don't you help me with dinner? Your father's had a long day." The protective positioning was subtle but clear to Jordan's trained eye. Diana was trying to control the conversation, to limit Emma's access to him. It was a tactical error that revealed just how desperate the situation had become. That night, after Diana fell asleep, Emma knocked softly on Jordan's office door. She entered hesitantly, like a soldier approaching a commanding officer with bad news. "Dad, I need to tell you something, but I'm scared." Jordan turned from his desk, giving his daughter his full attention. "Emma, there's nothing you could tell me that would make me love you less. But there are things you could keep from me that might make it impossible for me to protect you." The words seemed to unlock something in Emma. She collapsed into the chair across from his desk and began to cry. Not the careful tears he'd witnessed at the coffee shop, but the desperate sobs of a child who'd been carrying an adult's burden for too long. "Mom and Uncle Charles, they're together, Dad. And they made me promise not to tell you because they said it would destroy our family. But it's destroying me instead." Jordan moved around the desk and pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her tremble against him. The rage building inside him was nuclear, but his voice remained gentle. "How long, sweetheart?" "Since the summer. Mom said Charles was helping her plan a surprise for your birthday, but then I saw them at the hotel. They took me to dinner and explained that adults sometimes have complicated relationships and that you could never understand because you're too rigid about loyalty." The psychological manipulation of his child ignited something primordial in Jordan Boyer. They hadn't just betrayed him. They'd weaponized his daughter's love and loyalty, turning her into an accomplice in her own father's humiliation. Emma, listen to me carefully. None of this is your fault. None of it. Adults who put children in these positions are the ones who are wrong, not the children who get caught in the middle. Emma pulled back to look at him, hope flickering in her eyes. What are you going to do, Dad? Jordan's smile was cold and precise, the expression his enemies had learned to fear. I'm going to fix this, sweetheart, and I'm going to make sure no one ever puts you in this position again. As Emma finally slept peacefully for the first time in months, Jordan returned to his office and began planning. Charles Fry and Diana Boyer had made the mistake of assuming that loyalty was weakness, that trust was stupidity. They were about to learn that Jordan Boyer's greatest strength wasn't his military training or his business acumen. It was his absolute commitment to protecting what he loved, no matter the cost to those who threatened it. The war had begun, but they didn't know it yet. That would be their final mistake. Chapter 3. The Calm Before the Storm. Jordan Boyer had learned in the military that the most dangerous enemy was one who didn't know he was under attack. For the next 2 weeks, he played the role of the unsuspecting husband while methodically gathering intelligence and preparing his counteroffensive. Every smile at Diana felt like swallowing glass. Every handshake with Charles like touching a loaded weapon, but Jordan's discipline held firm. Emma's relief at sharing her burden was obvious. The dark circles under her eyes faded, and she began eating normally again. Jordan made sure to spend extra time with her, taking her out for father-daughter dinners and helping with her college applications. During these moments, Emma gradually revealed more details about how Diana and Charles had manipulated her. They said you were too controlling, Dad, that you'd overreact and probably hurt someone if you found out. Mom said Charles was helping her find ways to make you less intense. Emma's voice carried the confusion of a teenager trying to understand adult deceptions. They made it sound like they were protecting you from yourself. Jordan filed away each revelation, building a psychological profile of his enemy's tactics. They'd painted him as unstable, potentially violent, setting the stage for some future narrative where they would be the victims of his unreasonable response to their harmless affair. At Boyer Security, Jordan began implementing what he called succession planning. He gradually shifted Charles's access to sensitive accounts and information, claiming it was part of a broader reorganization to prepare for their upcoming expansion. Charles accepted the changes with minimal resistance, too focused on his personal schemes to recognize a professional death spiral. Jordan's research into Charles's background revealed fascinating details he'd never bothered to investigate during their partnership. Charles Fry wasn't just unfaithful. He was pathologically opportunistic. His previous business ventures showed a pattern of charming his way into partnerships, then systematically undermining his collaborators while positioning himself to take control. Diana wasn't his first married woman. She was simply his most financially promising conquest. The breakthrough came when Jordan discovered Charles's storage unit, rented under a false name, but paid for with a credit card linked to Boyer Security's corporate account. Using his security contacts, Jordan gained access and found boxes of documents, financial records, photographs, and most damning of all, recordings of Diana discussing Jordan's business dealings, client lists, and personal information that could be used for blackmail or corporate espionage. Charles hadn't just seduced Diana. He'd turned her into an intelligence asset against her own husband. The recordings were extensive, dating back almost a year. Diana's voice, initially hesitant, grew more confident as she provided details about Jordan's high-profile clients, their security arrangements, and their personal vulnerabilities. The final recording, dated just 3 days ago, featured Diana and Charles discussing their timeline. Jordan's military pension vests fully next year. Diana's voice was clinical, businesslike. Once we have the client list secured and the offshore accounts established, we can file for divorce. With the right attorney, I'll get half of everything, plus child support. Jordan will be too proud to fight dirty. Charles's response chilled Jordan's blood. And if he does fight dirty, we have enough information about his clients to create significant legal problems for him. A man with his background, involved with the kind of people he protects, the authorities would love to investigate those connections. They weren't just planning to leave him. They were preparing to destroy him professionally and personally, using his daughter as a weapon and his honor as a weakness. That evening, Jordan sat in his office reviewing financial records with newfound urgency. Boyer Securities' accounts showed subtle irregularities, expense reports that didn't quite add up, client payments that had been redirected to secondary accounts Charles controlled, and invoices for services that Jordan couldn't verify. The theft was sophisticated, designed to be discovered only after Charles had vanished with his stolen fortune. Jordan's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, Mom's going out tonight. Says she has a book club meeting." I know it's not true. The final confirmation came at 9:47 p.m. when Jordan's surveillance of the Marriott showed Diana entering the hotel lobby. She moved with the confident stride of a woman who believed her secrets were safe, her deceptions undetected. Jordan drove home and found Emma in the kitchen, pretending to study but clearly waiting for him. "Emma, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me completely." His daughter looked up with eyes that held more maturity than any 15-year-old should possess. "What do you need?" "Tomorrow, I'm going to confront your mother and Charles. It's going to be ugly, and there will be consequences. I need you to stay with your Uncle Frank for a few days while I handle this." Frank Boyer, Jordan's older brother, was a federal prosecutor who understood the importance of protecting family while ensuring justice was served. He would keep Emma safe while Jordan did what needed to be done. Emma nodded solemnly. "Will Mom be okay?" Jordan's smile was grim. "Your mother made her choices, sweetheart. Now she gets to live with the consequences. But you're innocent in all this, and I'll make sure everyone knows that." The next morning, Jordan implemented the final phase of his intelligence gathering. Using Boyer Securities' legitimate surveillance capabilities, he documented Diana and Charles's meeting at the hotel, their discussion in the restaurant, and their return to room 1247. The footage was comprehensive, time-stamped, and legally obtained through the hotel's existing security contract with Boyer Security. At 3 p.m., Jordan's phone rang. Charles's voice was casual, unsuspecting. "Jordan, I need to leave early today. Client emergency in New York. I'll be back tomorrow." "No problem, Charles. Handle what you need to handle." Jordan hung up knowing it was the last conversation they would have as partners. By tomorrow, Charles Fry would understand that his greatest mistake hadn't been betraying Jordan Boyer's trust. It had been underestimating the consequences of that betrayal. That evening, Emma packed her bags for Uncle Frank's house, moving with the quiet efficiency of a soldier preparing for deployment. As Jordan drove her to her uncle's place, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Dad, what are you going to do to them?" Jordan considered his answer carefully. Emma had been through enough trauma. She didn't need to carry the weight of his plans. "I'm going to make sure they can never hurt our family again. And I'm going to ensure that everyone understands what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness." Emma studied his profile in the dim light of the dashboard. "They really don't know you at all, do they?" Jordan's smile was cold and final. "No, sweetheart, they really don't." As he drove home alone, Jordan Boyer felt the familiar calm that had always preceded his most dangerous missions. Diana and Charles had spent months planning his destruction, using his daughter as a weapon and his trust as a tool. Tomorrow, they would discover that their carefully constructed plan had one fatal flaw. They had confused Jordan Boyer's capacity for love with his capacity for mercy. Those were two very different things, and the distinction was about to become brutally clear. Chapter 4. The Reckoning Begins. Jordan Boyer awoke at 5 a.m. on the day he would destroy his enemies. His routine was methodical, purposeful, the same preparation he'd followed before every high-stakes operation during his military service. Black coffee, tactical clothing that looked professional but allowed for complete freedom of movement, and a final review of his plan. The beauty of Jordan's approach lay in its simplicity. He would use the legal system and Charles's own greed to construct a trap from which there would be no escape. By 6 a.m., he was at Boyer Securities' offices, implementing the final phase of his preparation. Jordan activated his executive privilege to access all company financial records, downloading everything to encrypted drives. He then triggered the automated security protocol he'd installed years ago, a system that would lock Charles out of all company accounts and systems the moment Jordan entered a specific code. Charles would arrive at work to find himself digitally exiled from the company he'd been systematically robbing. At 7:30 a.m., Jordan placed a call to Detective Randy Connor of the Hartford Police Department's White-Collar Crime Division. Randy had been a client of Boyer Security, and Jordan had once saved his daughter from a kidnapping attempt by her non-custodial father. The debt of gratitude ran deep. "Randy, it's Jordan Boyer. I need to report corporate theft and fraud by my business partner. I have extensive documentation and surveillance footage. How quickly can you meet?" Within an hour, Detective Connor sat in Jordan's office reviewing the evidence. Charles's storage unit filled with stolen documents, the offshore accounts funded by money diverted for Boyer Security, and most damning of all, the recordings of Diana providing confidential client information. "Jesus, Jordan, this isn't just theft, it's corporate espionage. Some of your clients are federal officials, foreign diplomats. This could be a national security issue." Randy's expression was grim. "How long have you known?" "I discovered it yesterday. My first priority was gathering enough evidence to ensure conviction. Charles Fry is smart, connected, and charming. I needed an airtight case." Randy studied the financial records with the practiced eye of a veteran investigator. The theft alone is good for 10 years. The espionage charges could put him away for life. "What about your wife's involvement?" Jordan's jaw tightened. "Diana was manipulated by Charles, used as an asset. She provided information under the belief that she was helping him plan a business surprise for me. I want him prosecuted to the full extent of the law. As for Diana..." Jordan paused, his voice becoming colder. "Her punishment will be more personal." At 9:15 a.m., Charles arrived at the office with his usual confident swagger, completely unaware that his digital world had already collapsed. Jordan watched through the glass partition as Charles attempted to log into his computer, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as system after system denied him access. Charles knocked on Jordan's door, his charm beginning to crack around the edges. "Jordan, I'm having some technical issues. All my access seems to be down." "Come in, Charles. We need to talk." Charles entered and took his usual seat, but Jordan remained standing, a position of dominance that immediately shifted the dynamic. "Charles, I'm going to give you one chance to explain the $50,000 missing from our operating account, the client files in your storage unit, and the recordings of my wife discussing confidential business matters." The color drained from Charles's face, but his training in deception kicked in quickly. "Jordan, I don't know what you're talking about. If there are financial irregularities, we should contact our accountant. The Hartford police are already reviewing our accounts. Detective Connor is preparing arrest warrants as we speak. The only question now is whether you want to cooperate or let the federal authorities handle the espionage charges." Charles's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "You always were too rigid, Jordan. Too black and white. The business world requires flexibility, compromise. The business world requires trust. You violated that trust, stole from our clients, and used my family as weapons against me. That's not flexibility, Charles. That's betrayal." Charles stood abruptly, his demeanor shifting to open hostility. "Diana told me you'd react like this. All emotion, no logic. She's tired of living with a man who sees the world as a war zone. At least I could offer her a life of sophistication, of..." Jordan's movement was so swift that Charles didn't see it coming. One moment they were talking, the next Charles was pressed against the wall, Jordan's forearm across his throat, applying just enough pressure to communicate absolute serious intent without causing permanent damage. "Charles, I want you to listen very carefully. My wife may have been fooled by your charm, but I know exactly what you are. You're a predator who saw an opportunity and took it. You used my daughter's love for her mother to keep her silent about your manipulation. That's unforgivable." Jordan released the pressure slightly, allowing Charles to breathe. "The police will be here in 30 minutes. You can run, but the federal warrants will follow you anywhere in the world, where you can stay and face the consequences of your choices like a man." Charles's response was a sneer that revealed his true nature. "You think you've won? Diana's already filed for divorce. She'll get half of everything, including this company. And Emma? She'll understand eventually that her mother deserves happiness, even if you're too selfish to. Jordan's hand moved to Charles's throat again, this time with unmistakable lethal intent. If you ever mention my daughter again, the police will be investigating a very different kind of crime. Do we understand each other? Charles nodded frantically, and Jordan stepped back. At that moment, Detective Connor appeared in the doorway with two uniformed officers. Charles Fry, you're under arrest for corporate theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. As they read Charles's rights and led him away in handcuffs, Jordan felt the first wave of satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Charles would spend the next decade in federal prison, his charm useless against concrete walls and steel bars. But Charles was just the opening move. Diana's reckoning was yet to come, and it would be far more personal, far more devastating, and completely legal. At 11 a.m., Jordan drove home to find Diana in the kitchen, apparently preparing lunch with unusual enthusiasm. She looked up as he entered, her smile bright but nervous. "Jordan, you're home early. I thought you had meetings all day. My schedule cleared up unexpectedly. Diana, we need to talk." Something in his tone made her freeze, her smile becoming brittle. "What about?" Jordan placed a tablet on the kitchen counter and pressed play. Diana's voice filled the room, discussing Jordan's clients and their security arrangements with Charles. As the recording played, Jordan watched his wife's face cycle through denial, fear, and finally, desperate calculation. "Jordan, I can explain. Charles said he needed that information for planning to destroy me professionally and personally while stealing my money and manipulating my daughter." Jordan's voice carried the cold precision of a military tribunal. "Diana, Charles was arrested this morning. He's facing federal charges that will put him in prison for the rest of his life." Diana's composure cracked completely. "You don't understand. Charles and I, we love each other. He was going to take care of me, give me a life built on betraying your husband and traumatizing your daughter." Jordan's interruption was surgical in its precision. "Diana, you have a choice to make. You can walk away from this marriage quietly, with a reasonable settlement that allows you to start over. Or you can fight me in court, where these recordings and your participation in corporate espionage will become public record." Diana's face hardened, revealing a coldness Jordan had never seen before. "You can't threaten me, Jordan. I know your secrets too. I know about your clients, your methods. My methods are legal and documented. Your boyfriend's methods landed him in federal custody. Choose wisely, Diana." For the first time in their marriage, Jordan saw his wife clearly, not as the woman he'd loved, but as the calculating opportunist she'd become. The grief of that realization was profound, but it was also liberating. Diana Boyer had made her choice months ago when she decided to betray her family. Now she would live with the consequences of that choice, one way or another. Chapter 5. The Hunt Intensifies. Diana Boyer had underestimated her husband's capacity for strategic thinking, but she wasn't ready to surrender. Over the next 3 days, while Charles sat in federal detention awaiting trial, Diana launched her own counteroffensive with the desperation of a cornered predator. Jordan returned home Wednesday evening to find his house emptied of Diana's belongings and a legal notice taped to the refrigerator. Diana had filed for emergency divorce proceedings, claiming domestic abuse and threatening behavior. The petition requested immediate restraining orders, temporary spousal support, and emergency custody of Emma pending a full hearing. Jordan read the document with the detached professionalism of a man reviewing an enemy's battle plan. Diana's attorney, Matthew Clark, a high-priced divorce specialist known for destroying men in custody battles, had crafted a narrative that painted Jordan as a controlling, potentially violent ex-soldier who had threatened his wife's lover and was using his security business to intimidate witnesses. The restraining order would prevent Jordan from accessing his own home or contacting his wife. The emergency custody petition claimed that Emma was in danger from her father's increasingly erratic and violent behavior following the discovery of Diana's friendship with Charles. Diana's masterstroke was the domestic abuse allegation. She claimed Jordan had a history of intimidating behavior, that his military background made him dangerous, and that his discovery of her relationship with Charles had triggered violent threats. She had even provided photographs of bruising on her arm, bruising that Jordan knew hadn't come from him. But Diana had made a crucial error. She'd underestimated Jordan's preparation and overestimated her own cleverness. Jordan immediately called his attorney, Frank Lamb, a former military lawyer who specialized in defending veterans against false allegations. Frank arrived at Jordan's office within an hour, reviewing the divorce petition with the intensity of a general studying enemy positions. "Jordan, these are serious allegations. If they stick, you could lose Emma, the house, and potentially face criminal charges. What's your response?" Jordan activated his office's secure presentation system, displaying the comprehensive surveillance footage he'd been gathering for weeks. "Frank, meet the real Diana Boyer." The evidence was devastating. Diana and Charles entering and leaving the hotel together, their intimate dinners, their discussions in the restaurant about using Jordan's client information, and most damning of all, footage from that very morning showing Diana meeting with Matthew Clark at his office, 2 hours before she'd filed the restraining order, claiming she was afraid to contact an attorney due to Jordan's threats. Frank studied the timeline with professional admiration. "She's claiming you threatened her Monday night, but here's footage of her calmly planning legal strategy Tuesday morning. This destroys her credibility." There's more. Jordan displayed the audio recordings. Diana provided confidential client information to Charles for almost a year. She's not just an adulterous wife. She's an accomplice to federal crimes. The final piece of evidence was medical records showing Diana's recent visits to a plastic surgeon. Visits that coincided with the dates she claimed Jordan had physically abused her. The bruising in her photographs wasn't from domestic violence. It was from cosmetic procedures she'd had done to support her false allegations. Frank's smile was predatory. "Jordan, by tomorrow morning, Diana Boyer is going to wish she'd taken your original offer. This evidence doesn't just refute her claims. It exposes her as a calculating criminal willing to destroy her family for financial gain." That evening, Jordan drove to his brother Frank Boyer's house to see Emma. She was waiting in the living room, her face pale with worry. "Dad, Mom called. She said terrible things about you, that you threatened her and Charles, that you might hurt me too. I told her she was lying, but she sounded so scared." Jordan sat beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. "Emma, your mother is trying to rewrite history to justify her actions. The woman who called you isn't the mother you grew up with. She's someone who's desperate to avoid consequences for her choices." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Why is she doing this? Why can't she just admit she was wrong and try to fix things? Because some people, when they're caught in lies, double down instead of taking responsibility. Your mother has convinced herself that she's the victim in this situation, which means everyone else, including you and me, becomes the enemy. Jordan's phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. "Drop the charges against Charles or Emma gets hurt." Some accidents are hard to prevent. Jordan's blood turned to ice. They weren't just threatening him anymore. They were threatening his daughter. He immediately called Detective Connor, forwarding the threatening message. Within minutes, Randy arrived at Frank Boyer's house with 2 patrol units. "Jordan, this escalates everything. Threatening a minor is federal territory. I'm calling the FBI." But Jordan's mind was already shifting into combat mode. Threatening Emma was the line that transformed this from a legal battle into a war. Diana and her allies had just declared war on his daughter, and they were about to learn what happened when someone made Jordan Boyer's child a target. "Randy, I want full protection for Emma. Round-the-clock surveillance, the works. And I want to trace that phone number." The trace led to a burner phone purchased with cash, but Jordan's security cameras had recorded every vehicle that had passed his house in the past week. Cross-referencing the footage with the timestamp of the threatening message revealed a black sedan parked across from his house when the text was sent. The sedan was registered to a private investigator named Dean Nash, a man with a history of working for Matthew Clark's law firm on contested divorce cases. Dean's specialty was intimidation and evidence fabrication, exactly the kind of dirty tactics Diana's attorney was known for employing. Jordan's response was swift and merciless. Using his security firm's resources, he compiled a comprehensive dossier on Dean Nash, his history of witness intimidation, his connections to corrupt attorneys, and most importantly, his outstanding warrants in 2 other states for assault and extortion. By midnight, Dean Nash was in custody, arrested by federal agents on the outstanding warrants. His phone contained not just the threatening message to Jordan, but dozens of similar threats to other divorce targets, as well as recorded conversations with Matthew Clark discussing pressure tactics for reluctant clients. Matthew Clark's law practice collapsed overnight as the FBI raided his offices, seizing evidence of systematic witness intimidation, perjury, and extortion. Diana had chosen the wrong attorney, one whose criminal activities would now expose her own false allegations to federal scrutiny. But Diana's most devastating mistake was yet to be revealed. In her desperation to destroy Jordan, she had contacted Charles in federal detention, offering to provide additional information about Jordan's business in exchange for Charles's testimony against her husband. Federal prisons record all inmate communications. Diana's conversations with Charles, promising to fabricate evidence and perjure herself in court, were now part of the federal investigation into Charles's crimes. When Jordan received the call from Detective Connor Thursday morning, the satisfaction in his voice was unmistakable. Jordan, Diana Boyer, was arrested an hour ago on federal charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. Her communications with Charles Fry constitute additional crimes beyond the original espionage charges. Jordan felt the cold satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Diana had escalated the conflict, threatened his daughter, and chosen to fight dirty. Now she would face the consequences of those choices in federal court, where her charm and manipulation tactics would be useless against the weight of recorded evidence. But the war wasn't over yet. Diana still had allies, people who believed her version of events, people who might be willing to help her escape the consequences of her actions. Jordan Boyer had learned long ago that victory wasn't achieved by defeating the primary enemy. It was achieved by eliminating every threat to the people he protected. Diana Boyer and Charles Fry were neutralized, but their network of enablers and accomplices remained. Jordan's hunt was just beginning, and before it ended, everyone who had participated in threatening his daughter would understand why that had been a fatal mistake. Chapter 6: The Dominoes Fall. With Diana in federal custody and Charles facing life imprisonment, Jordan Boyd turned his attention to the broader network that had enabled their betrayal. His military training had taught him that individual enemies were rarely isolated threats. They were part of systems that required complete dismantling to ensure lasting security. Jordan's investigation revealed that Diana and Charles's relationship wasn't just personal. It was part of a larger scheme involving Matthew Clark's law firm. Clark specialized in orchestrating high-asset divorces by first destroying the target spouse through character assassination, false allegations, and systematic intimidation. Diana hadn't just been an adulterous wife. She'd been recruited as an asset in a criminal enterprise. The FBI's raid on Clark's offices revealed the scope of the operation. Over the past 5 years, Clark's firm had stolen millions from divorce targets through fabricated evidence, witness intimidation, and judicial corruption. Diana and Charles's plan to destroy Jordan wasn't unique. It was a proven business model that had victimized dozens of successful men across Connecticut. Jordan's security firm became the federal investigation's unofficial headquarters. His surveillance capabilities, combined with his access to high-level corporate and government security networks, provided investigators with evidence that would have taken them months to gather independently. The investigation revealed that Dean Nash, the private investigator who had threatened Emma, was just one of several criminals Clark employed for intimidation work. The network included corrupt court officials, compromised forensic accountants, and even a judge who had been taking bribes to rule in Clark's favor during custody hearings. As federal agents made arrests across the state, Jordan received a call that would reshape his understanding of the entire situation. "Mr. Boyer, this is Agent Jennifer Delaney with the FBI. We need to discuss your daughter Emma's role in this investigation." Jordan's blood chilled. "My daughter is 15 years old. She's not involved in any criminal activity. No, sir, she's not. But she's been recording conversations with your wife for the past 2 months. Emma Boyer has been working as an unofficial informant, gathering evidence of her mother's criminal activities. The revelation hit Jordan like a physical blow. Emma hadn't just been a victim of Diana and Charles's manipulation. She'd been actively working to expose them, carrying the burden of evidence gathering alone while protecting her father from the truth until she could ensure his safety. Agent Delaney continued. Emma contacted us 6 weeks ago through the FBI's anonymous tip line. She provided recordings of her mother discussing plans to frame you for domestic abuse, fabricate evidence, and coordinate with Charles Fry to steal your business assets. Your daughter has been incredibly brave, Mr. Boyer. Jordan drove immediately to his brother's house, where Emma was waiting with the composed demeanor of a young woman who had been carrying adult responsibilities for too long. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything, but I knew if you acted too quickly, they might escape or hurt someone. I needed enough evidence to make sure they couldn't wiggle out of the consequences. Jordan pulled his daughter into his arms, overwhelmed by pride and horror at what she'd endured. Emma, you shouldn't have had to handle this alone. But I wasn't alone, Dad. I had Uncle Frank helping me understand the legal issues, and Agent Delaney made sure I knew how to safely record conversations without putting myself in danger. I learned from the best. You taught me that protecting family means sometimes doing hard things. Emma's recordings were devastating. Diana discussing her plans to claim domestic abuse, her coordination with Matthew Clark to fabricate evidence, and most chilling of all, her willingness to destroy Jordan professionally even if it meant Emma would lose her college fund and future opportunities. She kept saying I'd understand when I was older. Emma's voice was steady but cold. That sometimes you have to sacrifice some people to save others. She said Dad was too rigid to adapt to changing circumstances, so removing him was actually a kindness. The psychological manipulation of his daughter ignited something primal in Jordan. Diana hadn't just betrayed him. She'd attempted to corrupt Emma's moral compass, turning her into an accomplice in her own father's destruction. But Emma had instead become the architect of her mother's downfall, gathering evidence with the patience and precision of a trained intelligence operative. Jordan realized his daughter had inherited more than just his protective instincts. She'd inherited his strategic mind and his unwavering commitment to justice. Over the next week, the arrest continued. Judge Milton Shepard, who had presided over dozens of Clark's divorce cases, was arrested for accepting bribes and fixing custody decisions. Court clerk Sonia Godfrey was charged with falsifying documents and selling confidential case information. The corruption extended from street-level criminals like Dean Nash all the way to the state's superior court system. Charles Fray's interrogation revealed additional co-conspirators. Facing life imprisonment, he provided information about other business partners he'd betrayed, clients he'd defrauded, and offshore accounts where stolen money had been hidden. His charm had finally failed him completely. Faced with concrete evidence and certain conviction, he became a cooperative witness eager to reduce his sentence. Diana's situation was more complex. Her federal charges were serious, but her cooperation could potentially reduce her sentence from decades to years. Agent Delaney offered Jordan the opportunity to influence Diana's plea agreement. Mr. Boyer, your wife's information has been valuable in uncovering the broader conspiracy. If she continues to cooperate and provides testimony against the remaining defendants, we could recommend a reduced sentence. What are your thoughts? Jordan's response was immediate and final. Agent Delaney, my wife threatened my daughter, participated in federal crimes, and attempted to destroy an innocent man's life for financial gain. I want her prosecuted to the full extent of the law. No deals, no reductions, no mercy. The message was clear. Jordan Boyer was not interested in reconciliation, forgiveness, or second chances. Diana had made her choice when she'd involved Emma in her criminal conspiracy. Now she would face the full consequences of that choice. The media attention was intense, but carefully managed. Jordan's military record and his reputation in the security industry made him a sympathetic figure, a decorated veteran whose family had been destroyed by criminals who had specifically targeted him for his success and integrity. Emma handled the attention with remarkable poise, giving carefully crafted interviews that portrayed her as a brave young woman who had protected her father from a criminal conspiracy. Her composure and intelligence impressed everyone who met her, and several Ivy League universities reached out with early admission offers. As the trials began, Jordan sat in the courthouse watching his wife and her co-conspirators face justice. Diana's attempts to claim victimhood fell flat against the mountain of evidence Emma had gathered. Her recorded voice, planning Jordan's destruction with casual cruelty, destroyed any sympathy the jury might have felt. Charles Fry received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison. Matthew Clark got 30 years. Judge Shepard was sentenced to 15 years and lost his pension. Dean Nash received 12 years for his intimidation and extortion activities. Diana Boyer was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for conspiracy, witness tampering, and her role in the corporate espionage against Jordan's clients. She will be 52 when released, her beauty faded, her charm irrelevant, and her future reduced to the consequences of her choices. At the sentencing hearing, Jordan was given the opportunity to address the court. His statement was brief and final. "Your Honor, the defendants targeted my family because they believe my loyalty and trust made me vulnerable. They were wrong. My loyalty and trust made me patient enough to gather the evidence needed to ensure they faced the full consequences of their crimes. They mistook restraint for weakness. That was their final mistake." As Diana was led away in shackles, she looked back at Jordan one last time. He met her gaze with the cold satisfaction of a man who had protected his family from predators and ensured they could never threaten innocent people again. Justice had been served, but Jordan Boyer's work wasn't finished. He had one final phase to complete, rebuilding his life and ensuring that Emma's future remained bright despite the darkness her mother had brought into their world. Chapter 7: Reconstruction and Renewal. With the criminal conspiracy dismantled and his enemies imprisoned, Jordan Boyer faced the challenge of rebuilding his life and his business while ensuring Emma's emotional recovery from the trauma of her mother's betrayal. The victory in court had been absolute, but victory always came with a cost that extended beyond the defeated enemies. Boyer's security had survived the investigation stronger than before. Federal agencies, impressed by Jordan's cooperation and the quality of his intelligence gathering, awarded his firm several lucrative government contracts. The publicity from the case, carefully managed to emphasize Jordan's integrity and Emma's courage, brought new high-profile clients who valued working with a man who had proven his loyalty under the ultimate test. Jordan restructured the company completely, installing multiple oversight systems to prevent any future partner from gaining the access Charles had abused. He promoted several trusted employees to leadership positions and established an employee ownership program that gave his people a stake in the company's success. Emma's recovery was Jordan's primary concern. Despite her remarkable strength during the investigation, she was still a 15-year-old girl who had lost her mother to federal prison and learned that the woman who raised her was capable of profound cruelty. Jordan arranged for her to work with Dr. Melinda Ballard, a psychologist who specialized in helping children of incarcerated parents. Emma is processing grief for a mother who is still alive but essentially dead to her, Dr. Ballard explained to Jordan during one of their consultations. She's mourning not just the loss of Diana, but the realization that the Diana she loved may never have existed at all. Emma threw herself into her studies and college preparation with the same intensity she'd brought to gathering evidence against her mother. Her early admission offers had grown to include Harvard, Yale, and MIT. Institutions impressed not just by her academic record, but by her demonstration of character under extraordinary circumstances. One evening, as Jordan was reviewing security protocols in his home office, Emma knocked on the door with an expression he'd learned to recognize. She had something important to discuss. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mom's sentencing hearing. When she looked back at you, what did you feel?" Jordan considered his answer carefully. Emma deserved honesty, but she also deserved protection from the darker aspects of his psychological makeup. "I felt satisfied that justice had been served. Your mother and her accomplices will never be able to hurt innocent families again. But did you feel sad or angry or anything else? Jordan studied his daughter's face, recognizing that she was trying to understand her own complex emotions about her mother's fate. Emma, I felt relief. For months, I had been living with enemies in my own house, threats to the person I love most in the world. When your mother was sentenced, that threat was finally eliminated. I'm not capable of feeling sympathy for people who threaten you. Emma nodded slowly. I keep thinking I should miss her, but I don't. The woman in prison isn't the mother I remember. Maybe that mother never existed. It's like mourning someone who died, except they're still alive and still dangerous. Jordan's heart ached for his daughter's pain, but he was also proud of her clarity. Emma had inherited his ability to see truth clearly, even when that truth was painful. Emma, you don't owe your mother anything. Not love, not forgiveness, not even sympathy. She made choices that destroyed your ability to have a normal relationship with her. That's her fault, not yours. During this period of reconstruction, Jordan received an unexpected visitor. Frank Boyer knocked on his office door one afternoon with a grave expression. Jordan, we need to discuss Diana's appeals process. Her new attorney is claiming prosecutorial misconduct and trying to get her conviction overturned. Diana's new legal team, funded by her family's remaining assets, was arguing that the FBI had violated her rights by using Emma as an informant without parental consent. They claimed Jordan had manipulated a minor child to gather evidence against her mother, making Emma's recordings inadmissible. The appeal was legally complex but factually weak. Emma had contacted the FBI independently, without Jordan's knowledge or influence. Her decision to gather evidence had been her own, driven by her recognition that her mother was committing crimes and threatening her father. Agent Delaney met with Jordan to discuss the appeal strategy. Mr. Boyer, Emma's testimony will be crucial. The defense is going to try to portray her as a child who was manipulated by you into betraying her mother. We need to demonstrate that Emma acted independently, with full understanding of her actions. Emma's response to the appeal was characteristically direct. Dad, Mom's lawyers want to claim I was too young to understand what I was doing? Let them try. I'll testify about every conversation, every lie, every threat she made. I'll show the jury exactly how well I understood the situation. The appeals hearing became a second trial, with Emma as the star witness. Her testimony was devastating to Diana's claims of innocence. Speaking clearly and confidently, Emma described her mother's criminal activities, her manipulation tactics, and her willingness to destroy Jordan professionally and personally. Diana's attorneys try to portray Emma as a confused child manipulated by an overly controlling father. Emma's response destroyed that narrative completely. I wasn't manipulated by my father. I was protecting him from my mother's criminal conspiracy. My father never asked me to gather evidence. I did it because I recognized that my mother was planning to commit federal crimes, and I wanted to prevent them. The appeals court rejected Diana's petition unanimously. Her conviction stood, her sentence remained unchanged, and her legal options were exhausted. Diana Boyer would spend the next 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of early release and no chance of overturning her conviction. As they left the courthouse after the appeals hearing, Emma walked beside Jordan with the confident stride of a young woman who had faced the worst life could offer and emerged stronger. Dad, I know this sounds strange, but I'm grateful this happened. Not for the pain it caused, but for what it taught me about people, about loyalty, about the difference between love and manipulation. Jordan felt immense pride in his daughter's wisdom and strength. Emma had been tested in ways no child should face, but she had emerged with her moral compass intact and her understanding of justice crystallized. Emma, you've learned lessons that will serve you well in life. You know how to recognize predators, how to gather evidence, how to protect the people you love. Most importantly, you know the difference between strength and cruelty, between justice and revenge. That evening, as Jordan sat in his home office reviewing the final legal documents that closed the appeals process, he reflected on the completeness of his victory. Diana and Charles were imprisoned. Their co-conspirators had been destroyed, and Emma was thriving despite the trauma she'd endured. But Jordan's satisfaction wasn't just about winning. It was about the thoroughness of the victory. His enemies hadn't just been defeated. They had been utterly annihilated. Their reputations were destroyed, their futures were eliminated, and their ability to threaten innocent people had been permanently removed. The military had taught Jordan that half measures in dealing with enemies only created future problems. By pursuing complete victory, by showing no mercy to those who had threatened his daughter, he had ensured that no one would ever mistake his love for weakness again. Diana Boyer had learned too late that Jordan's capacity for love was matched only by his capacity for absolute, merciless justice. The lesson had cost her everything, but it would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider threatening the Boyer family. Chapter 8. The Final Judgment. 2 years after Diana's conviction, Jordan Boyer had rebuilt his life into something stronger and more purposeful than before. Boyer Security had expanded internationally, with Emma working part-time in the company while completing her senior year of high school. She had accepted early admission to MIT, where she planned to study cybersecurity, a field that would allow her to protect people from digital predators the way her father protected them from physical threats. The healing process had been gradual but complete. Emma showed no lingering trauma from her mother's betrayal. Instead, she displayed a mature understanding of human nature that impressed everyone who met her. She had learned to distinguish between love and manipulation, between loyalty and blind trust, between justice and revenge. Jordan's own recovery had taken a different form. The betrayal had burned away any remaining naivety about human nature, leaving behind a man who was more cautious in his trust, but no less committed to protecting the innocent. His reputation in the security industry had grown to legendary status. Clients knew that Jordan Boyer would die before allowing harm to come to those under his protection. On a cold February morning, Jordan received a call that would test the completeness of his victory. Diana had been transferred to a minimum security facility after serving 2 years of her 18-year sentence, and she was requesting a meeting with Emma. Agent Delaney delivered the message with careful neutrality. Mr. Boyer, Diana claims she's found religion in prison and wants to apologize to Emma for the trauma she caused. The prison chaplain supports her request, and her rehabilitation counselors believe the meeting could be therapeutic for both mother and daughter. Jordan's response was immediate and final. Agent Delaney, my daughter owes that woman nothing. Not her time, not her attention, and certainly not her forgiveness. Diana Boyer gave up any right to contact Emma when she chose to involve her in criminal activities. But Emma, now 17 and preparing for college, had different ideas. Dad, I want to meet with her. Not to forgive her, and not because I miss her, but because I want her to see exactly what she lost when she chose to betray our family. Jordan studied his daughter's face, recognizing the cold determination that had helped her survive Diana's manipulation. Emma wasn't seeking reconciliation. She was seeking closure on her own terms. Emma, if you meet with her, it has to be with my attorney present and full recording equipment. I won't have her manipulating you again. Dad, she can't manipulate me anymore. I know exactly what she is now, and I want her to know that I know. The meeting was arranged for the following week at the Federal Correctional Facility. Jordan, Emma, and Frank Lamb sat across from Diana in a sterile conference room, with federal marshals monitoring the conversation and recording equipment documenting every word. Diana had aged significantly during her 2 years in prison. Her carefully maintained beauty had faded, replaced by the hard edges of a woman learning to survive in an unforgiving environment. But her eyes still held the calculating intelligence that had once fooled Jordan into thinking she loved him. Emma, sweetheart, I've thought about you every day since. Don't call me sweetheart. Emma's interruption was cold and precise. You lost the right to use endearments when you chose to involve me in your criminal conspiracy against my father. Diana's composure cracked slightly. Emma, I know you're angry, but if you could just understand. I understand perfectly. You seduced Charles Fry, provided him with confidential information about Dad's business, planned to frame Dad for domestic abuse, and used me as a weapon to keep him from discovering your crimes. I understand everything, including the fact that you're only sorry you got caught." Jordan watched with fierce pride as his daughter systematically destroyed Diana's attempts at manipulation. Emma had learned to see through emotional appeals and focus on facts and evidence. Diana tried a different approach. "Emma, I made mistakes, but I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Emma's response was delivered with surgical precision. "A mother protects her children from harm. You expose me to criminal activities, psychological manipulation, and the trauma of keeping secrets that could have destroyed our family. You're not my mother. You're a criminal who happened to give birth to me." The words hit Diana like physical blows. Her carefully constructed image of herself as a victim of circumstances crumbled under Emma's clear-eyed assessment of her actions. "I spent months recording your conversations, documenting your crimes, and protecting Dad from your manipulation. While you were planning to destroy him, I was gathering the evidence that would destroy you instead. Do you know what that taught me? It taught me that real love means protecting people, not using them." Diana's eyes filled with tears, but Emma remained unmoved. "You're crying because you finally understand the consequences of your choices. Dad taught me that actions have consequences, that loyalty matters, and that family means protecting each other. You taught me what betrayal looks like and how to recognize it in the future." Frank Lamb observed the exchange with professional admiration. Emma was conducting herself like an experienced prosecutor, methodically demolishing Diana's attempts at emotional manipulation while maintaining complete control of the conversation. Diana made one final attempt. "Emma, I'm still your mother. When I get out of prison, when you get out of prison, I'll be 29 years old with a career, possibly a family of my own, and 16 years of experience living without you in my life. You'll be a stranger who shares some of my DNA and nothing else." Emma stood to leave, her posture reflecting the confidence of a young woman who had faced the worst life could offer and emerged stronger. "I came here today to make sure you understand exactly what you lost when you chose to betray our family. You lost a daughter who loved you, a husband who protected you, and a life that most people would consider a blessing. You traded all of that for a criminal who's serving 25 years in federal prison." Diana's composure finally broke completely. "Emma, please. Goodbye, Diana. I hope the next 16 years in prison give you time to think about whether your choices were worth what they cost you." As they left the prison, Jordan felt the final piece of closure clicking into place. Emma had faced her mother one last time and emerged victorious, demonstrating that Diana's attempts at manipulation had no power over her anymore. "How do you feel?" Jordan asked as they drove away from the federal facility. Emma was quiet for several minutes before responding. "I feel free, Dad. For 2 years, part of me wondered if I'd been too harsh, if maybe I should feel guilty about helping send her to prison. But seeing her today, watching her try to manipulate me even now, I know I made the right choice. She's exactly what I thought she was." Jordan reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand. "Emma, you saved our family. Your courage, your intelligence, your commitment to truth, you're everything a father could hope for in a daughter." Emma smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Jordan had seen from her in months. "Dad, I learned from the best. You taught me that protecting family means sometimes doing hard things, that loyalty is earned through actions, not words, and that justice matters more than forgiveness." As they drove home, Jordan reflected on the completeness of his victory. Diana and her co-conspirators were imprisoned, their lives destroyed by the consequences of their choices. Emma had emerged from the trauma stronger and wiser, with a clear understanding of her own worth and an unshakable moral compass. But most importantly, the Boyer family had been purged of weakness, betrayal, and false loyalty. What remained was stronger, more honest, and completely united against any future threats. Diana Boyer had taught her daughter and husband valuable lessons about human nature, the importance of vigilance, and the cost of misplaced trust. The education had been expensive, but it had been worth every sacrifice to ensure that such betrayal could never happen again. Chapter 9. Legacy of Strength. 5 years had passed since Diana's conviction, and the Boyer family name had been restored to its position of respect and influence. Jordan Boyer, now 47, commanded one of the most successful security firms on the East Coast, with clients ranging from Fortune 500 executives to foreign diplomats who trusted him with their lives. His reputation was built on an absolute commitment to protecting those under his care, backed by the knowledge that he had faced the ultimate test of loyalty within his own family and emerged victorious. Emma Boyer, now 22 and a graduate of MIT, with degrees in cybersecurity and criminal justice, had joined Boyer Security as head of digital investigations. Her expertise in tracking financial crimes and corporate espionage had made her one of the youngest and most sought-after specialists in the field. Her childhood trauma had been transformed into professional strength, allowing her to protect other families from the kind of betrayal she had experienced. The Boyer home had been rebuilt as well, not physically but emotionally. The rooms that had once echoed with Diana's lies and manipulation now reflected the honest, direct communication between a father and daughter who had survived the ultimate test of family loyalty. They worked together, planned together, and faced challenges together with the unshakable trust that only comes from surviving betrayal and choosing each other over the ones who had tried to destroy them. On a spring morning in May, Jordan received a call that would provide the final chapter in Diana's story. She had been killed in a prison fight, struck down by another inmate during a dispute over commissary privileges. The irony was not lost on Jordan. A woman who had spent her life manipulating others had finally encountered someone who couldn't be charmed, threatened, or reasoned with. Agent Delaney delivered the news with professional courtesy. "Mr. Boyer, I wanted to inform you personally before you heard it through other channels. Diana Boyer died yesterday at the Federal Correctional Facility. The investigation is ongoing, but preliminary reports indicate she was involved in an altercation with another inmate." Jordan felt no sadness, no regret, no sense of loss. Diana Boyer had died to him 5 years ago when she chose to threaten Emma. The woman who had been killed in prison was simply a criminal who had finally faced the consequences of a lifetime of manipulation and betrayal. Emma's reaction was equally clinical. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Do you feel anything about Mom's death?" Jordan studied his daughter's face, recognizing that she was processing her own complex emotions about her mother's demise. "Emma, I feel relief. Diana Boyer was a threat to innocent people for her entire adult life. Her death means she can never hurt another family the way she tried to hurt ours." Emma nodded slowly. "I feel the same way. Not happy exactly, but relieved. Like a threat that's been hanging over us for 5 years has finally been removed." The funeral arrangements fell to Diana's sister, Maureen Hewitt, who had maintained a relationship with Diana throughout her imprisonment. Maureen contacted Jordan to inform him of the memorial service, making it clear that both he and Emma were unwelcome. "Jordan, I know you blame Diana for everything that happened, but she was still Emma's mother. Your daughter should have the chance to say goodbye." Jordan's response was cold and final. "Maureen, Diana stopped being Emma's mother when she chose to involve her in criminal activities. Emma said goodbye to Diana 5 years ago. She has no interest in attending a memorial service for a woman who tried to destroy her father." Emma confirmed Jordan's assessment when Maureen called her directly. "Aunt Maureen, the woman you're mourning isn't the same person who raised me. That woman died when she chose Charles Fry over her family. I'm not going to pretend otherwise to make other people feel better." The memorial service was sparsely attended. A few family members who had remained loyal to Diana despite her crimes, and some prison acquaintances who barely knew her. The obituary in the local newspaper was brief and factual, listing her survivors and the basic facts of her life, while omitting any mention of her criminal activities or the destruction she had caused. Charles Fry remained in federal prison, serving his 25-year sentence with no possibility of parole. The last Jordan had heard, Charles was working in the prison library, his charm and sophistication reduced to helping illiterate inmates write letters to their families. His appeals had been exhausted, his assets seized, and his future reduced to the concrete and steel that would contain him until he was an old man. Matthew Clark had died of a heart attack during his second year in prison, his body unable to handle the stress of incarceration after a lifetime of luxury and corruption. His law firm had been dissolved, his assets distributed to his victims, and his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the consequences of using the legal system to victimize innocent people. Dean Nash had been released after serving 8 years of his 12-year sentence, but his reputation was destroyed and his ability to find work severely limited. Jordan occasionally received reports that Nash was working as a security guard at a shopping mall, a fitting in for a man who had once threatened a federal agent's daughter. The network of corruption that had enabled Diana and Charles's crimes had been completely dismantled. Judge Milton Shepard died in prison, having lost his pension, his reputation, and his freedom. Court clerk Sonia Godfrey served 4 years and was released to a life of poverty and obscurity. Her career in the legal system permanently ended. As Jordan reflected on the complete destruction of his enemies, he felt the satisfaction of a mission accomplished with perfect efficiency. Every person who had threatened his family, who had enabled Diana's betrayal, who had participated in the conspiracy against him, had faced consequences that perfectly matched their crimes. Emma had grown into a woman of remarkable strength and clarity. Her childhood trauma transformed into professional expertise and unshakable moral courage. She was dating a fellow MIT graduate, a young man named Ryan who worked in cybersecurity for the Department of Defense. Jordan had thoroughly investigated Ryan's background and found him to be exactly what he appeared: honest, intelligent, and completely devoted to Emma. "Dad," Emma said one evening as they reviewed case files in Jordan's home office, "do you ever think about what would have happened if Mom had just been honest about her feelings? If she had asked for a divorce instead of trying to destroy you?" Jordan considered the question carefully. "Emma, your mother wasn't capable of honesty. She was a predator who saw our family as an opportunity to be exploited. Even if she had asked for a divorce, she would have tried to manipulate the situation to her advantage. The betrayal was inevitable because it was part of her nature." Emma nodded, her understanding of human psychology refined by years of studying criminal behavior. "I've learned to recognize the signs now. The way predators test boundaries, the way they try to isolate their targets from support systems, the way they gradually escalate their manipulation. Mom followed the textbook pattern perfectly." Jordan felt immense pride in his daughter's wisdom and strength. She had been tested in ways that would have broken many people, but she had emerged stronger, more perceptive, and completely committed to protecting others from the kind of predators who had once threatened their family. Boyer Security had become more than just a business. It was a legacy of strength, integrity, and absolute commitment to protecting the innocent. Emma would inherit the company eventually, but she had already earned her place as Jordan's partner and equal through her intelligence, courage, and unwavering loyalty. As Jordan looked around his home office, filled with awards, photographs of successful operations, and evidence of a life spent protecting others, he felt the deep satisfaction of a man who had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. His enemies were dead, imprisoned, or destroyed. His daughter was strong, successful, and completely loyal. His business was thriving, and his reputation was unshakable. Diana Boyer had taught him valuable lessons about trust, loyalty, and the importance of vigilance in protecting family. The education had been expensive, but it had been worth every sacrifice to ensure that such betrayal could never happen again. Jordan Boyer had learned that love and loyalty were not weaknesses to be exploited. They were strengths that, when properly protected and fiercely defended, could overcome any enemy and survive any betrayal. The war was over. Jordan Boyer had won completely, and his victory would echo through generations of his family, teaching them that some things, loyalty, integrity, the protection of innocence, were worth any sacrifice to defend. Diana Boyer's legacy was a cautionary tale of betrayal and its consequences. Jordan Boyer's legacy was proof that good men, when pushed too far, could become forces of absolute justice that no enemy could survive. The lesson was clear: Threatening the Boyer family had consequences that lasted forever. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.